Fire lit up the night sky on Space Station K7. Alarms screamed through the corridors of the largest slave market in the Orient sector. Guards ran in all directions, their boots hitting the metal floors with heavy thuds. "She's here," a guard shouted. "The shadow is here." The name made everyone freeze. Even the bravest guards felt fear crawl up their spines. They had all heard the stories. Wherever the shadow went, slave markets burned and masters lost control of their slaves. Through the smoke walked a tall figure in a black cloak. This was Valera. Her silver eyes glowed in the darkness, and her pale skin seemed to shine. She was a Nexian, a race known for reading minds. But Valera was different. She didn't just read minds. She could turn slaves against their masters with a single thought. "Stop her," the chief guard ordered. 20 guards raised their laser guns. Valera didn't even blink. She just smiled and reached out with her mind. In the cells below, thousands of slaves felt her touch in their heads. It was gentle, like a friendly whisper, but this whisper carried power. Asterisk, rise up. Break your chains. Your slaves no more. Asterisk. The station shook as thousands of slaves suddenly broke free. Their shock collars stopped working. Their chains fell off. Years of mental programming disappeared in seconds. The guards forgot about Valera and ran, but they didn't get far. The freed slaves poured out of their cells like an angry flood. Valera walked calmly through the chaos. She had done this 69 times before. This market was number 70. Each time, her reputation grew. Each time, more slaves learned they could fight back. A small blue-skinned slave girl ran up to Valera. "Are you the one they fear?" "The shadow." Valera knelt down. Up close, her silver eyes were kind. "They fear what you can become," she said softly. "Every slave has power inside them. I just help them find it." She touched the girl's forehead. The girl gasped as she felt something wake up inside her, courage she never knew she had. "Will you teach us to be strong like you?" the girl asked. Valera's face grew dark as she remembered her past. She remembered the pain, the experiments, how her old master had tortured her until her powers grew beyond control. He had tried to make her a perfect slave. Instead, he had created someone who could destroy the whole slave system. "You're already strong," Valera told the girl. "You just need to remember that no one has the right to own you." Suddenly, Valera's head snapped up. Her powers had sensed a new mind nearby. It felt different, not like any alien she had met before. The thoughts were clearer, warmer somehow. Asterisk human. Asterisk, the mind told her. One of the new species that had just joined the galaxy. Valera felt curious. This human's mind was full of something she hadn't felt before. Not fear, not hate, something else. But Valera hadn't survived this long by being careless. She stood up as more explosions shook the station. "Remember," she told the girl, "you free yourself. I just show you the way." Then she pulled her cloak tight and disappeared into the smoke. Behind her, freed slaves destroyed everything. The galactic hegemony would rebuild. They always did. But each destroyed market was another crack in their power. Each freed slave was another nightmare for the masters. And somewhere out there, her old master was waiting. The one who had made her what she was. Someday, she would find him. But for now, she had more markets to burn and more slaves to wake up. The shadow's work was far from over. Valera moved silently through the burning station's corridors. The human mind she had sensed was getting closer. She should have left already, but something about this mind pulled at her curiosity. It felt peaceful. That made her suspicious. She turned a corner and stopped. A tall man in a brown jacket stood there, checking something on his wrist computer. He had dark hair, Asian features, and wore simple clothes that helped him blend in. But it was his calm that caught her attention. Everyone else on the station was panicking, but his mind stayed steady like a rock in a storm. The man looked up and smiled. "I was hoping to meet you," he said in perfect trade speech. "I'm Marcus Chen. Human traitor, and you're the shadow. Valera reached into his mind, trying to find his real purpose, but his thoughts were strange, organized and clear, unlike the chaotic minds she usually touched. She saw genuine interest, concern, and something that surprised her: respect. Your mind is different, she said, keeping her distance. What do you want? Marcus held up his hands to show he had no weapons. To talk. Humans are new to the galaxy, but we've already learned a lot about the slave trade. Some of us are working to stop it. Your way is effective, but... Suddenly, Valera's powers picked up danger. Guards, she hissed. 2 squads coming from both directions. Then we should probably run, Marcus said calmly. He pointed to a maintenance tunnel. That leads to the docking bays. My ship is there. Valera hesitated. Every instinct told her not to trust him. But her powers sensed no lies in his mind, and the guards were getting closer. They ran together through the narrow tunnel. Behind them, boots thundered on metal floors. Energy bolts hit the walls, leaving burning holes in the metal. Marcus led the way, moving fast but staying calm. Why are you helping me? Valera demanded as they ran. Because you're fighting slavery, Marcus answered simply. Humans know a lot about that. We spent centuries ending it on our world. We learned some things that might help. They burst out into the docking bay. A sleek trading ship sat nearby, its engines already humming. But between them and the ship stood 12 elite guards with heavy weapons. Surrender, Shadow, their leader shouted. There's nowhere to run. Valera smiled. I never run. She reached out with her powers, trying to touch their minds. But something was wrong. Their thoughts felt blocked. Neural shields, Marcus said quickly. New technology. That's why they set this trap. For the first time in years, Valera felt fear. Without her powers, she was just one person against 12 armed guards. But Marcus stepped forward. Good thing I didn't come alone. He pressed a button on his wrist computer. Suddenly, the lights went out. Small devices on the guards' neural shields sparked and died. In the darkness, Valera felt their minds become clear again. She smiled and reached out with her power. The guards turned on each other in confusion. In seconds, the path to Marcus's ship was clear. Coming? Marcus asked, heading for his ship. We've got about 2 minutes before station security overrides my hack. Valera looked at the human with new interest. He had planned this, but not to capture her, to help her. His mind still showed no fear, no hatred, just genuine desire to help. Why should I trust you? She asked. Marcus shrugged. You're in my head. You tell me if I'm lying when I say I want to show you a better way to free slaves. One that doesn't require burning everything down. The station's emergency sirens began to wail. More guards would come soon. Valera made her decision. Sometimes, she thought, the biggest risks brought the biggest changes. She followed Marcus into his ship, wondering if she was making the huge mistake or taking the first step toward something new. Either way, she knew this human had just changed everything. Marcus's ship jumped into hyperspace, leaving the burning station behind. Valera stood in the ship's small control room, watching the stars blur past. She kept her powers focused on Marcus, still not fully trusting him. Why do they fear humans? She asked suddenly. She had seen it in the guards' minds. A flash of extra panic when they saw Marcus was human. Marcus turned in his pilot's chair. Because we did something no one expected. He pressed a button, showing a hologram of Earth. 2 years ago, the hegemony tried to invade Earth. They thought we'd be easy to conquer. They were wrong. The hologram showed massive alien ships attacking Earth. But the human ships fought in strange ways, hiding in asteroid fields, using their own planet's storms as weapons, and coming up with tricks the aliens had never seen before. We won because we adapted, Marcus explained. The hegemony ships were bigger and stronger, but humans are good at finding new ways to fight. We think differently. That's why I sought you out. We think your way of fighting slavery could be better too." Valera crossed her arms. "My way works. I free slaves. I punish masters. And they rebuild every time," Marcus said gently. "Look." He showed her more pictures. Slave markets she had destroyed were operating again. Masters she had punished had gotten new slaves. Even some of the slaves she had freed had been captured again. Valera felt anger rising. "Then I'll burn them again. Or," Marcus said, "we could try something new. I work for a secret human organization. We don't just break chains, we change the whole system. We hack their money records. We expose their secrets. We help slaves escape and give them new lives, new identities. We turn their own people against them." Valera was about to answer when her powers caught something. A distress signal, weak but clear. Her eyes widened. "There's a slave transport near here," she said. "The biggest one I've ever sensed. Thousands of mines." Her voice grew hard. "We have to help them." Marcus checked his instruments. "Wait, something's not right. That transport, it's heading straight for the core worlds. No slave ship ever goes there. It's too heavily guarded." "Then they won't expect an attack," Valera said. She reached for the ship's controls. Marcus caught her hand. "It's a trap. I don't care. There are children on that ship. I can feel their fear." "And I can feel a setup," Marcus argued. "My organization's sources say someone's hunting you. Someone big. Someone who knows how you think." Valera pulled her hand away. Images flashed in her mind. Her old master, the torture chamber, the experiments that had made her powers so strong. Her voice shook with rage. "No more waiting. No more clever plans. Those slaves need help now." Marcus stood up. "Then let me contact my people. We can get help. Do this smart." But Valera wasn't listening anymore. The slave transport was so close. All those minds calling out for help. She couldn't ignore them. Not again. Never again. Her powers lashed out. Marcus didn't expect it. He fell unconscious, softly caught by Valera's telekinesis. She laid him gently on the floor. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "but some prices have to be paid." She took control of the ship's computers. As she turned the ship toward the slave transport, a small part of her wondered if she was making a mistake. Marcus's way seemed smarter, safer. But Valera hadn't survived this long by being safe. Sometimes you had to burn everything down to build something new. She just hoped Marcus would understand, if she survived what was coming. Valera's heart pounded as she brought Marcus's ship closer to the slave transport. It was huge, bigger than any slave ship she'd ever seen. The minds inside called to her like 1,000 voices crying in the dark. Behind her, Marcus groaned and started to wake up. She had tried not to hurt him when she knocked him out, but guilt still gnawed at her. "Valera, stop," Marcus said weakly, pulling himself up. "It's not too late." "I have to help them," she answered, guiding the ship toward the transport's docking bay. Her powers reached out, touching the minds inside. But something felt wrong. The minds were too clear, too easy to read. The docking bay doors opened smoothly, too smoothly. No alarms, no guards. "It's a trap," Marcus said again, now fully awake. "Please, listen to me." But Valera had already landed the ship. Her powers surged out, ready to wake up the slaves and start another rebellion. Then she froze. The transport's halls were empty. The crying minds she had felt, they were recordings. Telepathic recordings playing in small devices all over the ship. "Welcome home, my greatest creation." The voice made Valera's blood turn to ice. A tall figure stepped out of the shadows. A hegemony noble with gray skin and cold black eyes. Her old master, Commander Vex. "You taught me so much about telepathic technology," Vex said smoothly. "All those experiments we did together. They helped me create these." He held up a small device still playing fake telepathic signals. Valera screamed in rage. Her powers exploded outward, trying to crush Vex's mind. But he just smiled. "New neural shields," he said, tapping his head. "Made specially for you." Doors opened all around them. Real slaves stumbled out, hundreds of them. But they wore strange collars that glowed with purple light. "Telepathic amplifiers," Vex explained. "They don't block telepathy like shields do. They redirect it. Shall we test them?" He pressed a button. Valera felt her powers connect with the slaves' minds. But instead of freeing them, her powers bounced back, amplified 1,000 times. Suddenly, she could feel everything. Their fear, their pain, their terror of her. Images flooded her mind. She saw herself through their eyes. The shadow, the destroyer, the one who burned markets and vanished, leaving freed slaves to face their master's revenge. She saw what happened after she left. The brutal punishments, the tightened security, the slaves who died trying to follow her example. "Stop," she whispered, falling to her knees. "Why stop?" Vex asked cruelly. "Isn't this what you wanted? To feel their minds, to free them?" The amplified terror and pain hammered at her mind. Valera screamed, her powers lashing out wildly. The slaves screamed too as her out-of-control powers filled their heads with rage and fire. Then suddenly, quiet. Marcus stood between her and Vex, holding a small device that glowed blue. The telepathic noise died down. The slaves stopped screaming. "Neural dampener," Marcus said. "Blocks all telepathic signals in a small area. My organization's latest invention." He looked at Vex. "Your trap failed. Let them go." Vex laughed. "Failed? Look at her, my greatest weapon, finally understanding what she really is. What she does to the ones she claims to help." Valera looked at the slaves, seeing their fear of her with normal eyes now. She saw the truth at last. In her rage to free them, she had become another kind of master, forcing her will on their minds, using their pain to fuel her revenge. She whispered. "I became just like him." Marcus knelt beside her. "No, you can be better. But first, we need to survive this." Alarms began to blare. Security doors slammed shut, and Vex's smile grew wider. The real trap was just beginning. Alarms screamed through the slave transport ship. Valera sat on the cold floor, still shaken by what she had seen in the slaves' minds. Marcus stood protectively in front of her, his neural dampener keeping Vex's telepathic weapons at bay. "Kill them both," Vex ordered his guards. 20 soldiers raised their weapons. But Marcus smiled. "Now," he said quietly into his wrist communicator. The ship's lights went dark. Emergency signs flashed red in the darkness. Through the windows, Valera saw 3 sleek ships appear out of nowhere, their cloaking devices dropping. "The Human Liberation Fleet," Marcus explained. "I called them before you knocked me out. I knew you wouldn't be able to resist the trap." Explosion rocked the ship as the human vessels opened fire. Not at the ship itself, but at specific points. The security systems, the weapon stations, the engine controls. Their accuracy was perfect. "Fall back," Vex shouted. "Activate the..." But Valera had seen enough. She rose slowly, her silver eyes glowing in the darkness. "No more," she said quietly. "No more violence." Her powers reached out, but differently this time. Instead of forcing rage into the slaves' minds, she touched their pain gently. She understood now. She had been so focused on breaking chains, she forgot about healing wounds. "What are you doing?" Vex demanded as the slaves' collars sparked and died. "What humans taught me," Valera answered. "There's another way." Marcus stepped forward. "On Earth, we learned that ending slavery isn't just about breaking chains. It's about healing. About helping both slaves and masters see each other as people." He pressed some buttons on his wrist computer, and hidden speakers throughout the ship came to life. A powerful voice filled the air. An old human speech about freedom, about dignity, about how hurting others hurts ourselves. "That's Martin Luther King Jr.," Marcus explained to Valera, one of Earth's greatest freedom fighters. He taught us that hatred can't drive out hatred. Only love can do that. Valera understood now. Her powers touched the minds around her again, but with gentleness. She shared memories, slaves helping each other survive, guards who secretly gave extra food to children, even masters who questioned their choices. "Stop this nonsense," Vex shouted. But even as he spoke, Valera felt cracks in his mental shields, not from force, but from truth. She stepped closer to her old master. "I see your pain too," she said softly. "The experiments you did on me. Someone did worse to you when you were young. That's why you need to control everything, to hurt others before they hurt you." Vex's shields cracked more. His hands shook. The human ships had disabled all the transport's weapons. Marcus's people were boarding now, helping slaves to safety. But Valera kept her eyes on Vex. "I wanted revenge for so long," she told him. "But humans showed me something better. They showed me how to break cycles, not just chains." She held out her hand. "Let me show you what real freedom feels like." Vex stared at her hand. For a moment, the cruel master was gone. She saw the scared child he had once been, twisted by the hegemony's cruelty into a monster. "The slaves," he whispered. "They'll want revenge." "No," Marcus said, stepping forward. "They'll get justice, real justice in fair courts, human courts where everyone is equal. And you'll get help, not just punishment." Valera felt it. The moment Vex's mental shields collapsed completely, not from her power, but from his own choice. His mind opened, full of pain and fear and buried deep hope. She had dreamed of this moment for years, meeting her torturer again. But now, as she helped him up, she felt something unexpected. The start of healing, for both of them. The human way, she realized, wasn't about being soft. It was about being strong enough to break cycles of pain, not just chains of metal. 3 months after Vex's capture, Valera stood in front of a crowded room on Nuterra, Earth's largest space colony. Former slaves sat next to former masters, all listening as she spoke about healing and change. "The shadow used to bring fire," she said, her silver eyes sweeping the room. "Now I bring light." In the back of the room, Marcus smiled. He watched as Valera used her powers in a new way, not to force minds, but to help people understand each other. When a former slave spoke about their pain, she helped the masters truly feel it. When a former master talked about their fears, she helped the slaves see the person behind the cruelty. But not everyone liked these changes. "The Hegemony Council is meeting," Marcus told her after the session. "Our spies say they're more afraid of this than they ever were of the shadow." Valera nodded. They should be. Burning markets was easy. Changing hearts, that's real revolution. Their new methods were spreading fast. On 12 worlds, slaves had peacefully walked away from their masters, protected by human laws. On 20 more, masters had freely released their slaves after attending Valera's healing sessions. The old system was cracking, not from violence, but from understanding. "We have a problem, though," Marcus said, showing her his datapad. "Remember the slave master Valcon, the one who ran the biggest markets in the Outer Rim? The one who said he'd rather die than change?" Valera remembered him well. "He's gone missing, and he took something from Vex's old labs." Marcus's face was serious. "The telepathic amplifiers, all of them." Valera felt cold. Those amplifiers had nearly broken her mind on Vex's ship. In the wrong hands. "He's planning something big," she said. "My old network is picking up whispers, slaves being moved in secret, masters gathering weapons. They're afraid." Marcus nodded. "The peaceful revolution is working too well. They'd rather have you burning markets than changing minds." Valera started to speak, but suddenly grabbed her head in pain. A telepathic message, incredibly strong, forced its way into her mind. "*You betrayed us, Shadow," became weak, soft. Now watch what real power looks like asterisk. The message came with images, hundreds of slave markets across the galaxy, and in each one, telepathic amplifiers were being installed. Valkun, she gasped. He's going to use the amplifiers on every slave in the hegemony at once. Turn their pain into a weapon. Marcus was already calling the human fleet. How long do we have? Hours maybe. He's learned from what I used to do. But instead of freeing slaves, she shuddered, he'll use their suffering to drive everyone mad. Masters, slaves, everyone. The whole system will collapse into chaos. Then we'll stop him, Marcus said firmly. He touched her shoulder. The old Valara would have rushed in alone. But you're not alone anymore. She looked at him gratefully. He was right. She had changed. They had changed things together. Gather everyone, she said. Every freed slave who's learned healing. Every master who's changed sides. Even Vex, he knows how the amplifiers work. A different kind of army, Marcus smiled. Valera stood straighter. Once, she had been the galaxy's most feared rebel. Now she would be something more powerful, a healer leading other healers. Valkun thinks pain is the strongest power in the galaxy, she said. Let's show him he's wrong. As they rushed to prepare, Valera felt no fear. The shadow had fought with darkness. But now she had learned a harder, braver way to fight. With light. The central slave market on Nexus Prime was massive. Thousands of beings moved through its halls, their minds crying out in pain. At the center of it all stood Valkun, a cruel smile on his scaled face as he watched the telepathic amplifiers power up. Almost ready, he said to his guards. When these activate, every slave's pain will hit every mind in the sector. The so-called peaceful revolution ends today. Not today, a calm voice said. Valkun spun around. Valera stood there, but not alone. Marcus was beside her, along with dozens of others. Freed slaves who had learned to heal, former masters who had changed their ways, and even Vex, now helping to undo his past wrongs. The shadow, Valkun laughed. Or what's left of her. You've grown weak, Valera. No, she said quietly. I've grown strong enough to heal instead of hurt. Valkun's hand moved to a control panel. Pretty words. But let's see how they stand against this. He pressed the button. The amplifiers hummed to life. Pain and fear from thousands of slaves poured into them, growing stronger, ready to explode outward and drive everyone mad. But Valera was ready. She reached out with her powers, not fighting the pain, but accepting it, understanding it. Behind her, the others did the same, each one taking a small part of the burden. What are you doing? Valkun demanded. Showing you what real strength looks like, Marcus answered. He nodded to Valera. She stepped forward, letting the amplified pain flow through her. But instead of being crushed by it, she transformed it. Where there was fear, she found courage. Where there was hatred, she found hope. Remember who you were, Valkun, she said softly. Before the hegemony taught you that power means hurting others. Remember the young slave who once helped another escape, even knowing you'd be punished. Valkun's eyes widened. How did you? Because I see you, Valera said. All of you. The pain you hide. The kindness you buried. She held out her hand. Let me show you what freedom really feels like. No. Valkun slammed his hand on the controls. Full power. Let them all feel the truth of their weakness. The amplifiers screamed. Pain and fear exploded through the market. But it hit a wall, not of force, but of compassion. Valara and her allies stood firm, accepting the pain, transforming it, sending back understanding and healing. Slaves throughout the market began to stand straighter. Masters stopped and looked around in confusion as new feelings touched their minds. Empathy, understanding, the weight of what they had done. Impossible, Valkun whispered. The amplifiers were running at full power, but instead of chaos, they were spreading peace. Valera walked closer to him. The old shadow would have destroyed you, she said gently. But I understand now. You're just like I was. So hurt that you can only think of hurting others. She touched his forehead. Valkan gasped as her powers showed him the truth, not just of others' pain, but of his own. The scared child he had been. The kindness he had lost. The person he could still become. The amplifiers overloaded and died, but it didn't matter anymore. Throughout the market, slaves and masters were looking at each other differently. Understanding was spreading faster than fear ever could. Valkan fell to his knees, tears in his eyes. What have you done to me? Not to you, Marcus said, helping him up. For you. The same thing Valera did for all of us. Showed us a better way. Valera looked around the market, feeling the change spreading through thousands of minds. The shadow had brought fire and fear, but today she had brought something stronger. Hope. 1 year later, Valera stood at the window of the new Terra Peace Center, watching ships land and take off. Each one carried people who wanted to learn the new way. Her way, of healing minds and breaking chains. Still hard to believe sometimes, Marcus said, joining her at the window. Remember when you knocked me out and stole my ship? Valera laughed. Remember when you tricked me with a neural dampener? They smiled at each other, remembering how far they'd come. The Peace Center had been Marcus's idea, but Valera had made it work. Former slaves came here to heal. Former masters came to learn and change. Even other Nexians visited, eager to learn how to use their telepathic powers for healing instead of control. The latest reports are in, Marcus said, showing her his datapad. Slave markets are shutting down across the galaxy, not because we destroyed them, but because nobody wants slaves anymore. Valera nodded. Hard to keep slaves when they can show you their pain. Hard to be cruel when you understand what cruelty does. A small group of Nexian children ran past them, laughing. They were former slaves, but their silver eyes now shone with joy instead of fear. Some of them waved at Valera, not as the shadow, but as their teacher. You have a visitor, Marcus said softly. In the garden. Valera walked out to the center's peaceful garden. Vex sat there, looking older but calmer. After his trial, he had chosen to help undo his wrongs. His knowledge of telepathic technology now helped protect freed slaves instead of hurting them. My old master, Valera said, sitting beside him. My greatest mistake, Vex replied with a small smile. And my greatest teacher. We taught each other, Valera said. She looked at the garden, where former slaves and masters walked together, talking and learning. I thought freedom meant destroying everything. You thought it meant controlling everything. We were both wrong. The humans showed us better. Vex nodded. Their way of changing hearts. It's harder than breaking bones, but it lasts longer. A ship roared overhead, one of the new human liberation fleet vessels. They didn't carry weapons anymore. Instead, they carried teachers, healers, and hope to worlds still trapped in the old ways. Valkan asked to see you, Vex said. He's been helping other former slave masters change. Says he finally understands what real power is. Valera smiled. Her greatest enemy had become another voice for peace. Tell him to come teach here. We need everyone who understands both sides of the chain. As the sun set, Valera walked through the Peace Center's halls. In one room, a former master wept as he truly felt what he had done to his slaves. In another, former slaves learned to use their pain to help others heal. Everywhere, minds touched and understood each other. Marcus found her later on the roof, watching the stars. Missing the old days? He asked. The excitement of being the shadow. Valera shook her head. The shadow brought fire. She was needed then. But now, she looked at him gratefully. Now we bring light. It's better. Below them, the Peace Center glowed like a beacon in the night. Ships approached from all directions, bringing more people eager to learn, to change, to heal. The Hegemony Council voted today, Marcus said. Slavery is officially banned in all sectors, not because of force or fear, but because enough hearts changed. Valera finished. She took his hand. Thank you for showing me a better way. Together, they watched the stars and the ships and the people below. All free, all healing, all learning that the strongest chains were broken not by force, but by understanding. The shadow was gone, but Valera remained, bringing light to the darkness, one mind at a time. And that was the greatest victory of all.